Hi there, hope you're all doing well. This week I had originally planned to do a more chaos tainted Space Wolf scheme. However, halfway through this mini I realised I'm just painting a little bit of a darker Space Wolf, so that is actually what this video is going to be, and I'll go back to the drawing board for the tainted scheme. The mini for this test is one of my Space Bears, since I'm going to be having a kill team with them outside of my regular force. Starting off, I primed him black and began the armour by mixing in some Seafarer's blue into matte black. This is going over all of the armour for the shadow colour. I tried to leave that black in the recesses between the panels just for that little bit of extra contrast. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. You can also join Discord using the link in the description, where you can share anything you have been hobbying on, or just hang out and chat. Getting onto the mid-tone of the armour, I mixed in some more Seafarer's blue and began going over all of the armour panels again. I just left that darker tone in the recesses and the shadowed parts. I think this is where I started to go wrong in terms of a tainted scheme. This is a little bit bright for a Chaos Space Marine. After getting the mid-tone all finished up, I moved on to the edge highlights using a little more Seafarer's blue in the mix. I tried to keep this one fairly thin, just so the highlights are a little bit more subtle and doesn't brighten up the mini even further. Now that I have the main armour colour all painted up, I can get onto the base coat and a few other sections with charred brown. This base coat colour is for all of the gold trim, leather parts, fur and the base. As usual, all the base coating on these parts take a little bit longer than I thought they would, but it ends up saving a lot of time in the end having to do them individually. Since this guy is part of a kill team, it makes more sense to try some non-metallic metal just to make him stand out that little bit more. To start the middle ground of the gold trim, I mixed some British khaki in with charred brown, which I choose to cover up a good chunk of these trim. I just leave that pure charred brown in the areas I want the darker contrast to be. This process takes a couple of mixes, making my way up in brightness and in a smaller area on the trim. Once I got close enough to the mid-tone I want, I switched over to pure British khaki before moving on to the brighter parts, which I start adding a little bit of sand yellow into that mix for. Because the highlights are so much smaller, it doesn't really take that long to do these parts. It will just take a couple of mixes before I add the final highlight of sand yellow, just in the very center of the reflections. The next section I get done is the fur and the weapons. The fur being base coated already just gets a highlight with hull red. The weapon casing and axe handle get a base coat with a couple of coats of this to fully cover that black primer. Pushing in the mid-tone on the red, I mixed in a little demon red and went over the majority again. I just left that pure hull red in the recesses around the panels on the bolt gun and the shadow side of the axe handle. Being a red paint, this does take a couple of coats to build up some opacity, it just looks smooth on those panels. After these couple of coats, I switched to just Demon Red and went around the edges. While the paint looks very bright going on, it does dry fairly bit darker, and it just adds a subtle highlight on the edges that I want. With the bolt gun casing and the axe handle all done now, I can move on to these silver parts, which would also be non-metallic metal using the black primer as the shadow colour. I jumped straight into working my way up to that middle ground with some uniform grey mixed in with matte black. Something I didn't realise when I first printed out this model is that the arm holding the bolt gun is actually cybernetic, so that gets the silver treatment at this point as well. Just like with the gold, there are a couple of mixes used to make my way up to that mid-tone of pure uniform grey. Since the uniform grey is pretty bright, I only added a single highlight past this point by mixing in a little bit of off-white, just touching up the very centre of the reflections and a few edges to finish them off. The last step on the actual mini is the axe head, which I'm going for a blue power weapon look, starting off with a base coat of night blue. With the base coat dry, I began making my way up in brightness by mixing some Seafarer's blue in. I could have used a different blue to make this process a little bit easier, but I had this on my palette from earlier and it just makes sense to keep with that. The bulk of these mixes go around the edges where the axe forms the sharper edge. On the flat of the blade, I added a few streaks and scratches to look like energy flowing across the blade. The axe is then finished off with pure Seafarer's blue across the very edges and tried to keep them in the centre of those streaks just to get a little bit more contrast in there. I didn't get it perfect, but I think it adds a little bit of the effect anyway. For the final steps, I added a dry brush on the base with golden brown. With the amount of pigment powder I put on the base in the end, this step isn't really necessary, but variation always helps sell that natural look. Adding some more variation to the base and also bringing up the fur a little bit more, I gave these parts a wash with bone wash. On the base, this just blends the colours together a little bit more. On the fur, it uses it to darken down the recesses and get a bit more definition into it. The last bottle of mini is a quick glaze of fluorescent blue across the axe blade, and in the recessed chaos symbol on the base. This didn't quite do what I thought it would, but on the axe it does blend the colours together like a wash would do. On the base, I just used it to tint that symbol that I'd already painted white in the past. And that was it for my not so tainted Space Bear. The base was just finished off with some pigment powder over the majority again and across his feet, just to tie him into that environment. Which does mean the rest of the kill team need to be done in the same environment, no matter how I paint them up in the future. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. You can also join Discord using the link in the description, where you can hang out to chat and share anything you have been hobbying on. For those of you who want to pick up some painting supplies or new minis, there are a couple of affiliate links in the description below, where I get a little bit of a kickback at no extra cost to yourselves. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. If you did, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe for more content. Most importantly though, be kind to each other.